walk upon free soil, if we breathe in the sweetness of liberty, let us give thanks. Let us honor the fallen. And let us never forget.
Great to see you today. Turn in a Bible if you have one there. Otherwise, grab the Bible that's in the rack or turn in your tablet, your phone. Turn to John chapter 15. We're going to continue this message series. We're in the Upper Room series. It's the last thing that Jesus said to his disciples before he was crucified on the cross. And I think there's so much in here that's packed into such a small place. And we're gonna try to unpack a little bit more today. It's like an addendum to last week. If you remember from last week, if you were here, Jesus talked to us about being the vine and the branches, that he's the vine, we're the branch, and then from that flows through us fruit. And it's godly fruit. It's what God had purpose for us to do. It's part of our life's purpose is to do that kind of fruit and produce for others. The branch does not oftentimes eat its own fruit. The fruit is for someone else. And that's how God designed it. So we're going to go back and revisit that for just a moment. But before we get into John chapter 15, let me ask you a question. I want to take you back. For some, a couple of years. For some, maybe a few more years. I want you to go back to when you were a child. Remember when you were in grade school? And there was maybe, like, you're going to play kickball, probably not soccer, but it might have been softball, kickball, some sporting event. And then here was the dreaded time when two captains were chosen, and then all of you lined up, and the captain would choose one at a time, like, I choose you for my team. And then the other captain, I choose you for my team. And do you remember if you were chosen sooner than later, the feeling that you had by being chosen? And then if you happen to be one of the finalists towards the end, then it oftentimes just got divided up. Well, you take those and I'll take these. And you remember that feeling? Kind of feeling like leftover. You know what we're going to see today? Is that God chooses us. He doesn't just say, well, yeah, I suppose you could be on my team. I suppose you can go to heaven. Yeah, that'd be all right. That's not God. We're going to see something really powerful today that God says, you didn't choose me. I chose you. All of us have this deep longing to belong. We want to belong. We want to feel like we belong in our families. We want to feel like we belong at work. We have all these groups, civic groups. Why? Because people want to feel like they belong in those groups, like they're wanted. Maybe they're even needed. Because there's this deep desire in all of us to just want to belong. And sometimes we miss that God says, you belong. And even churches, we want to belong in the church. We really want to belong. And sometimes when we struggle to get connected to the church, that we feel like we don't necessarily belong. And the church should be one of those places that we always feel like we can belong here, because this is where God says, I choose you. You're chosen. You're not here by accident. You're not here because of your parents. You're not here because of a spouse. You're here because God said, I choose you. And that's what we're going to look at today. It's pretty powerful. So let's review just a little bit. In John chapter 15, we're going to go back to verse 5 and just read so that we get the context of the vine and the branches. Jesus says, verse 5, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me, and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you're like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. All right, now here's where we're going for today, starting with verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Remain in my love. Now just pause for a moment. Remember, Jesus is in the upper room. He's with his disciples. So this is not just some generic. He's talking to them and says, just like the Father loved me, I loved you. That's pretty powerful. Imagine what it would have been like as a disciple that you're sitting in that upper room and you don't quite realize who Jesus is yet. You're not quite sure he's God. You're about to find out in the next few days because the death and resurrection are on the horizon. And then you realize that God himself verbally said, I love you. That probably would sear in your brain. And then he encourages them, now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. Why is Jesus talking so much about love? There's a little bit of a dilemma. I want you to imagine if you were God for just a moment. You want the world to know that they're loved. How do you do that? Well, we know the greatest gift, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. So he showed us how much he loved us. But then here's the dilemma. For those that know what Christ did and experience that love, that's awesome. What about the rest of the world? How does God show the rest of the world how much he loves them? How does he do it? This is where you and I come in. That God calls us to love others in such a way that they will experience firsthand what it means to be loved by God. That is our purpose. It's why God called us into his family. It's why God chose us, which we're going to see in a moment here. He chose us not as a privilege, but with a purpose. There's a big difference between those two. If he chooses us with a privilege, then awesome. I'm saved. I'm going to heaven. I know Jesus. I've got my sins forgiven. The heck with the rest of you. That's a privilege that you're chosen. But that's not what this is. God calls us and loves us and says, now, I'm asking, I'm pleading, I'm begging. Would you show the world love? So that through us, they can experience firsthand God's love. That's what he's asking of his disciples.